Hello, welcome everyone to today's webinar as part of Canadian Patient Safety Week. It's titled, Let's Talk About Safer Care in the Community. My name is Andrea Piché, and I'm a Senior Program Lead here at Healthcare Excellence Canada. We are pleased to offer French simultaneous interpretation for this event. So to access that translation, you can select French from the Interpretations Options menu right at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any technical difficulties during this webinar, please just feel free to reach out to our technical support. You can do that by just sending a chat message. There's a participant that's titled Technical Support, and that feature will help you in any way. As we gather today, I'd like to acknowledge that we are joined by folks spread far and wide from coast to coast to coast, as well as beyond. And we are all on lands that have been walked by Indigenous people since the beginning. I'm personally joining from lands nestled between an escarpment and Lake Ontario in the Niagara region that are the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee peoples, and are covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. This is an area I'm learning more about, and I'm learning about the rich history and the continuing traditions of our First Nations people here. And what I've learned is that it's an area where Indigenous people and European settlers have shared moments in the past of coexisting as equals. And I'm really inspired by some of these stories because they remind us how, through learning and unlearning, we can forge new paths of reconciliation and healing. So I invite all of us to continue to look for and act on these opportunities. And I also invite you to pop into our chat and introduce yourself and share a little bit about the land where you're joining from today. And if you're not sure where the traditional lands that you're on, we'll pop into the chat the Native Lands website where you can learn more about the territory that you're joining from. As we move ahead into today's session, I want to recognize that talking about safer care requires talking about harm, which isn't always easy or comfortable. So please take good care of yourself today. We've posted links to mental health resources in the chat if you need some additional support during or after the webinar. This is our third webinar as part of Canadian Patient Safety Week. So hopefully those of you attending, you've already signed up to receive invitations to all our webinars and events, as well as access to activities and resources. And if not, I'm going to share QR codes on the screen at the end of this webinar. So please make sure you stay for those. Canadian Patient Safety Week, it's an opportunity once a year to bring together and highlight the work that happens across our healthcare system to continuously improve how we provide safer care. It's also an opportunity to learn together. It's a way that inspires us as we look ahead, as we make commitments of new ways to support patients, families, communities, staff, and organizations to all work together to provide and receive the safest care possible. So I encourage you, please visit our website and our social media platforms to learn more about Canadian Patient Safety Week activities that you can participate in and how you can share your achievements. What are the things that you've done in the past year? Or what are your reflections on this year's campaign? There's lots of swag that you can order, things that you can use year round, not just during this week. There's also lots of free resources that you can download, like our Rethinking Patient Safety Guide, our harm activity cards. We have safety conversation guides. We also have a relatively new 6-module Patient Safety's Essentials course that can help you and your teams dive deeper into your journey of continuous improvement towards safer care. So, with all of this excitement about Canadian Patient Safety Week, I am so privileged to be here today to have a conversation with 4 panel members who will hopefully start a conversation that's going to keep rippling on in your communities, something that you can continue to talk about with the people that you provide care with and for, and with your colleagues, really around safer care in the context of care that's provided in the community. So I'd like to invite our panelists into the virtual room. Come on in, friends. If you turn on your cameras, we'll be able to see you. Wonderful. Hello. And so I thought rather than sharing a scripted bio, you are all such amazing humans, and I would love it if each of you could just share with us a little bit about you, whatever you'd like folks on the audience to know, maybe a little bit about the work you do and really what informs your perspective on what matters with respect to providing safer care. And I'll just go in order of the panelists as you're listed on the slide. So we'll start with Ashley, go to Micheline, Tammy, and then Julie. So over to you, Ashley.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Ashley Mollison. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm a white settler with Scottish and Irish heritage. I'm calling in today from Treaty 7 territories, which is the territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina and the Iahe Nakota nations, and the Battle River territory of the Otipemisiwak Métis Nation. So for a decade or so, I've worked at the University of Victoria with Kelly Stadjahar's research program. It's around equity in palliative care. So we've worked to improve access to and quality of palliative care for people experiencing health and social inequities from a basis of homelessness, poverty, racism, and other forms of discrimination. So we've done this through research directly with people that are living and dying in contexts of inequity, along with their supporters, their service providers, such as housing and shelter workers, outreach workers, support workers, to really learn about the barriers that people experience to health and social care. But most importantly, what kinds of facilitators and approaches feel good for people, feel safe, and want to make people access care. So before and during my employment in this field, I was an inner city worker. I also had other roles such as community organizer, volunteer, and even a caregiver in context of harm reduction and housing justice work. So really, I think what brings me to this panel today and what informs me is the belief of the strength of community. And I'm really interested in talking more about that today because of the love and the care and the support that I see people getting and accessing among their friends, their neighbors, their community members, and also workers and organizations in inner city settings. So I think we have a lot to learn from these communities and groups. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ashley. What a lovely introduction and a lovely little preview about the importance of widening our understanding of care and where care comes from. So thank you. Micheline, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Ashley. So inspiring. We just met when we were preparing this panel, and it's really good to be with you. And also, this, what is it, 446 people? That's amazing. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see the interest in this topic. So I'm joining you today from Treaty 1 territory, which is the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene peoples, and also the homeland of the Red River Métis. I am a descendant of a Métis woman by the name of Angélique Dion, and I've just kind of recently connected with that. And it really, I think, gives me a connection to be able to find the ways in which we can journey together with Indigenous peoples so that together we can work towards a more just and loving world. And so that brings me to the work that I do at Actionmarguerite. Alors, Actionmarguerite is a collective of 3 personal care homes and 2 supportive housing programs, as well as an adult day program in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I've been there for 3 years. I joined right in the middle of the pandemic. Many people ask me why, and I say, well, why not? So this really topic of safety, although I wondered, how much I know about it or I'm connected to it, I think that it goes back to some of the work that I did probably 15-ish years ago for 10 years around creating cultures of compassion within health and human service organizations. For me, compassion is really a capacity to be fully present or as present as we can be so that we can meet the suffering in our world and find the ways to alleviate it together. And I think that that is crucial for this whole safety conversation, is that we would be attentive to safety as we increase our presence to the compassion within us, among us, and in the very fabric of organizational life. So I have a debate in me that says, well, you know, people say that long-term care is not necessarily community, and maybe I'll debate that today with you. But we do serve 48 people, which would be traditionally known as community. And the majority of the 600 people we support do live in what is more traditionally known as long-term care here in Manitoba. So with that, I'm turning it over to you, Andrea, and looking forward to our exploration here today. Thanks.
Thanks, Micheline. Also looking forward to the exploration, because as you said, this is an open conversation. This is not a scripted conversation. This is a place for us to really move into the nooks and crannies that really arise based on your experiences. And I love the notion that you've already put forward around safe care is compassionate care. So looking forward to picking that up as we go along. Over to you, Tammy.
Here we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Malley. I live in Miramichi, New Brunswick, and I'm very fortunate to live in an area where we're actually surrounded by 3 First Nations communities of the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet. So we are near Esquinobaditch and I'm trying to pronounce these right, Natawaganick and Metapanagia. So we have a very diverse culture here, and we're very, very fortunate for that. I work with the Nursing Home Without Walls program. I'm a seniors navigator. And what we do is we work to keep seniors in their homes. So like Micheline said, I will happily debate you that long-term care is about community care. And long-term care can be done in the community, and it's oftentimes more enjoyable and better for the mental health of the senior. If you ask them if they want to go in a nursing home or they want to stay in home, I'm going to say most of the time they're going to very adamantly say they want to stay in their home. So we work to keep them in their home. How we do that is different for each client. Everybody has different needs, different backgrounds. So part of giving that safer care is about person-centered. We really strive to make sure we're doing person-centered care, making sure that we take the time. When I do an intake with a senior, I ask them, what is their religion? What is their background? Do they have children? Do they, have they experienced poverty in their life? These are all things that shape them and the care that they need. And are they isolated? Do they have close family? Do they get out very often? So, what is it that they really need? And providing safer care to me really is about knowing the person. And then that way you really have a perspective of what they need, what they want, and how to best care for them in their home. And safer care too, when you're in their home, you're really looking at identifying potential hazards in the home, whether it's a chemical hazard, if they have some sight problems and they're blind, making sure that, chemicals are properly stored, and, there's some way to identify with some sort of braille on the bottle. Or, in the winter, I'm in Eastern Canada. The snowstorms are not fun, and the driveways get very icy. So how do we tackle those sort of problems? So safer care can be both safe for the client, it can be safe for the worker. It really is just a holistic approach, and really getting to know that person, you can kind of figure out more about what you need to do and what you can expect from them as well. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And I'm glad there's other people here that enjoy, long-term care is in the home. Really happy to hear that. So that's what Nursing Home Without Walls. It's about keeping them out of the nursing home, diverting them away from hospitals, making sure that, they're happily, safely aging in place at home. So I'll turn it back to you, Andrea.
Thanks so much, Tammy. And I love this idea of this recognition, right? That folks want to stay home. And when we can provide safer care at home, that means that folks can stay home longer, right? And that's it's it's really the impetus, right, for good quality of life. And so there's a strong motivation. How do we provide care that feels safe for folks where they want to be? So yeah, really looking forward to folding your ideas in here today. And finally, Julie, would love to hear your intro.
So, hi, my name is Julie Diner, and I work from Thunder Bay, originally known as Anemki Wekadong, is now also treaty territory of the Fort William First Nation, signatories to the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. I work with vulnerably housed folks, so most of my people are unhoused. So with palliative diagnosis, my journey started when I was working at a low barrier shelter here in Thunder Bay, and Hospice Northwest, an organization, came into the shelter and did a presentation, the St. Elizabeth's education on palliative care for frontline workers. And that's the day I kind of began to understand what I was missing, caring for the people in the shelter. So I had a lot of people that wanted to stay in the shelter to die. So now I get to work with the PAC team, which is the Palliative Advocacy and Care Team here in Thunder Bay, and I do outreach work. So my role is to connect providers and clients or patients that are homeless together, get them better care. I help with communication, rides. I'm lucky enough to work in a community health center, so I have a lot of resources to do that. So I'm really passionate about people that are homeless and vulnerably housed getting quality care. And I'm looking forward to today. I'm also very nervous and pretty new at doing this kind of thing, so bear with me.
Julie, we're so grateful you're here. You are a perfect person to contribute to this conversation as somebody who works with such a vulnerable population. And I think what safety looks like and feels like, especially to that population, is possibly different than in other areas of community care. So I think that your experience in your voice here is a really important part of this conversation in looking broadly when we think about safety in the community. What are we thinking about? And I think this dimension is really important. So yeah, you know what? And let's just put it out there. We're all a little nervous here, right? I see now 505 participants, which just makes my heart so full that we have such a beautiful big community of folks across the country that really all care about providing safer care. And so that's what's lifting me up and taking a little edge off the nervousness. So hopefully you feel held by the now 506 folks that are all tuning in. So maybe before, just to give everybody a chance to take a breath here, yeah, before we dive right into the topic and our first question of the conversation, maybe I could just take a second to frame our conversation in the theme of this year's Canadian Patient Safety Week, which is broadening our view of harm, right? And so traditionally, when we have conversations about healthcare harm or improving safety, we're usually centering them around events that cause physical harm. So in acute care settings, it's often medication errors, it's falls, it's hospital-acquired infections. You know, Tammy, you gave some great examples of important safety, concerns in some of the home care settings like chemical hazards and snow and ice. So these are important things that we want to continue to focus on. And this year's theme encourages us to hold that and then to expand our view to also include psychological and spiritual harm. So how do the experiences of those providing and receiving care relate to dehumanization, widespread power imbalances, systemic oppression, right? How do these things contribute to our experiences of harm? How do we provide care that both is safe and feels safe for those providing and receiving care? So I just want to fold that in as we start our conversation. And I think maybe a nice way to kick this off would be just connecting around your individual experiences and your context. So you each gave us a little bit of an overview of where you work and the kind of work that's provided there. And I'm interested around, you know, what have you experienced in providing care and support that relates to harm or potentially safety, if you want to look at it from things that, you know, have enabled safety in your community, from the perspective of people seeking care or the providers or both. So really, what have you seen in your community experiences around this topic of harm? And maybe that'll kind of give us some branching off inroads to go. And so this time we'll switch the order around, and I'll start with Micheline, and then go to Tammy, and then Julie, and then Ashley. So Micheline, can I invite you to lead us off to share what you've seen? What have you experienced in your community setting with respect to harm?
There's many things that come to mind when you ask that question, Andrea. But the thing that I think I want to focus on at this particular juncture is loneliness and the harm that has caused. It was there pre-pandemic. It got really highlighted during the pandemic. And I think that as a society, so this is like beyond the health system, it's like as a society, we have a responsibility to address that loneliness. And it's not a one-way street. So it's not just, the people that we support at Actionmarguerite that might be experiencing loneliness. It may be others in the community as well. And so can we, as an organization and in our community here in Winnipeg, be part of that connectivity? And last year we did commit to reimagining volunteerism at Actionmarguerite, and also a partner organization that mostly serves francophone seniors, donc les aînés francophones ici à Winnipeg. And really to discover that there are many people out of the 600 people we support, there are many that the only people in their life are paid to be in their life. Well, there's a problem with that. And just because, you enter into long-term care, or just because you've become sort of isolated in community at home in a congregate setting or in your own home, and, you want to age in place, doesn't mean that you don't have the possibility of making meaningful connections in your life. So a big part of this reimagining volunteerism was exactly that, to really go and see, do we have people outside of Actionmarguerite who would even want to, be part of this endeavor? And in a year, we recruited over 100 new volunteers. Now, that is like substantial. And it really moved me to know that we were so well surrounded, and that there would be very interesting matches between the people we support and someone who wants to build a meaningful relationship. And how I'm going to tie this into the topic of today, well, one is, okay, like the getting to know one another. So I think, Tammy, you mentioned that, that when you know people, you can better support them. And there can be a much more meaningful exchange, and not just like, oh, I am the care receiver. Like, this is a very human endeavor. And so I love to be able to kind of foster that. And like, we have one, it's called the PALS program, PALS, and it was started by one of our sister organizations called Saint-Hilaire. And they were kind enough to just kind of share their tricks of the trade and how it all unfolds. And so Joe and Jennifer were kind of the pilot or the demonstration project people who were willing to try this out. And Joe will tell this story, so I'll bring his voice in. He didn't have anyone visiting him pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and now he has a relationship with Jennifer, which decreases his isolation. I think there's been like examples of where harm was reduced because they had a conversation, because he was able to better express how the care teams could better meet his needs. And so I really kind of, that's very meaningful to me, and we should, like, we want more of those. So that's where we're headed around this whole idea of, you know, opening the doors and facilitating those very human connections. So that's what I'll say for now about that.
That is such a nice opening, Micheline, because it's, you know, we're talking about broadening our understanding of harm, but you're also talking about broadening our understanding of care, right? And I love that you're tugging on both at the same time, and framing, you know, loneliness as, well, actually harm as ignoring loneliness, right? When we are ignoring loneliness, we are causing harm. And I think that is another dimension that doesn't often get talked about when we think about what is safer care, right? And so providing that compassionate care and not just paid services is providing safer care. And so I've got lots of questions now, having listened to what you shared, but I'm going to just hold on to them for a little bit, and then move over to Tammy. Tammy, would love to hear a little bit about your experiences in Nursing Home Without Walls, and, you know, what harm has looked like in the community, what safer care has looked like in your community, and what really matters to the people that, you know, provide and receive support and services at Nursing Home Without Walls.
So I'm going to echo what Micheline said, is loneliness is very large in what we do. We have a wellness coordinator, and her sole job is to go into people's homes and do social visits with them, or just, even if they just want to play a card game, or again, that's getting to know them, right? What do they like? What do they want? You know, she's pretty good at, when she goes into a home and she sees a bunch of undone puzzles, she kind of suggests that instead of them suggesting it. So, you know, it looks like she's kind of leading and saying, hey, I'd love to do a puzzle. Do you want to do it with me? And so that gives them kind of a bit of spark. And we find when we do an intake with them and we kind of ask, do you go out very often? You know, how many times do you get visitors? How connected do you feel to the community? Those answers are typically, you know, I don't feel connected. I go out for groceries when I get my, you know, my OAS check at the end of the month, or, you know, I see my family once a month. And you can kind of tell that they, you know, they feel very isolated and lonely, even if they don't come out and say it. It's very evident and it's very clear. So we make sure that we kind of offer that right from the get-go and say, well, hey, I have this person and she loves to do this. Would you be comfortable with her coming in? And it's almost always a resounding, yeah, I'd really like that. And thankfully the person who does the wellness visits, the one-on-one social visits, she is an incredibly spunky, upbeat, perky, down to do whatever kind of person. And she just lights up a room. So it's really great that she goes in there and kind of gives that good energy. There's a couple other harms that we've seen recently too, is physical hazards is one. And that could be, you know, a step that maybe they try to rig a ramp on it, and the ramp is not necessarily built according to code, and it's not built very sturdy. We've seen that once. We have one client right now, and it's an ongoing issue. She has a lot of flooding in her basement, and it's because there's a natural well under her ground, and it keeps kind of coming in. But thankfully, there was a community member actually that got in touch with me to tell me about this woman, and we went and were able to get a pump secondhand for free. get somebody to go in and install it, get her water pumped out, to kind of eliminate that part of the hazard. So we can set her up with getting some home care, because that's ultimately what she needs, but get her in a place where the home care agency will be able to go in safely, because it wasn't safe at the time. And we see that quite a bit, and especially when we started, we've been open actually just since January 19th of this year. So we did see kind of a winter with clients, clearing off the snow, getting snow removal, the ice on the steps. Some of them have concrete steps, and you put ice on top of that, and it's, especially with kind of a shaky railing on an older home, it's quite dangerous, especially for them who they're more prone to fall. So getting them connected with, there's a volunteer service that will go and shovel off the walkways for seniors that really need it. So getting them connected to that service, to kind of try and solve the problems of the hazards. Sometimes we can't solve it, but sometimes we can. Like with that was a pretty easy solve. Another hazard we see quite a bit is medication mismanagement, especially with our clients who perhaps have some memory issues and live alone. We do have one client that we call her almost every morning just to be, hi, how are you? You know, reminder, take your medication, because she was dumping them all into a container and taking it every 3 days when she would remember. Very, very unsafe. So trying to work around that and make sure that she has what she needs, and, you know, minimize sort of what's going on. And it's not done with ill intent on her, like on any of these clients' parts that they have hazards. It's just, they're just trying to do the best that they can. And their acuity at this stage versus what they were like at 50, 40, 30, years old, it just might not be the same anymore. And they might have some cognitive deficiencies and declines. And so to work with them, and again, that's just getting to know them, who were they 20 years ago? Who are they today? What do they need 20 years ago versus what do they need today? Has there been a decline? Has there been anything that's been happening? So really it is about just getting to know the person. Person-centered care is really important. That's how you're able to provide them with the best care. And if you're providing them with the best care, they will trust you. So when you have to have a hard conversation like, hey, maybe you should go see your doctor about getting an assessment, they have that trust with you. So they won't, they might take it a little bit better.
Thanks, Tammy. What's really emerging out of what you've shared is the need for care and support providers to have the flexibility to do what's needed, right? Because there's often that question around, but whose job is it? So when there's a ramp that's not functioning and it's presenting a risk, when you see that there's chemical hazards in the home, when you're picking up on an issue that might not show up on your typical checklist of tasks that paid care professionals are asked to do, who fills in those gaps, and how do we create structures and roles and space within those roles for folks to sort of address what's not on the typical checklist of tasks, and getting back to that notion of person-centered care, relational care, compassionate care. Like, how do we ensure that this is the role of our providers? And I see, thanks Lucy in the chat, like wraparound services, again, to have this sort of collaborative approach and to really be able to go in eyes wide open and just see what's needed, and help in the way that folks really need it. So, I think there's a lot of questions around how do we enable that? And I think Nursing Home Without Walls is doing a fantastic job of creating, roles for people where this is it. They have the flexibility to take on the tasks that really fit and match with person's needs. So thanks for lifting that up in this conversation. And now, was it Ashley? I lost track here. We're going to, oh no, I think I said Ashley was going to come in next. So why don't you come on in, Ashley?
Sure. Okay, so yeah, so I guess in terms of harms, which is what I'll focus on in this response, is really the folks that I've worked with and the people that have been participants in our research. have, as I mentioned before, have had experiences of homelessness, of racism, discrimination in mainstream health and social services. And so I really, I would say their experiences are often that of facing judgment, and discrimination in care settings, not being believed, being dismissed, their pain and symptom needs not being met, facing penalties for telling the truth about their lives and experiences, and also being evicted and moved out of community settings when their medical needs become too high. And a lot of this is related to the barriers to getting, mainstream health and social support in the settings where people live, whether that be shelters or supportive housing. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later because I do think that there's also some really awesome approaches and facilitators to getting people care in community to support aging in place, as the other panelists have talked about. So I just wanted to kind of maybe ground this in a story, to talk about Cliff, because he's somebody that I always think about. That's not his real name, but he was a participant in one of our research studies. And he is a man that had been traversing between community clinic, between hospital, really trying to get relief from his immense back pain. He lived in a car. Sometimes he would live in a shelter, kind of moving back and forth between spaces, working a labor job to make enough money to buy illicit drugs on the street to treat his back pain, and never kind of figuring out what was going on with him. So one day he goes into the ER, he demands a MRI, he ends up getting a scan and eventually gets diagnosed with stage 3 spinal cancer. And so the thing that this is a common story around delayed diagnosis and lack of access to support and care in the populations I work with. But what really stood out for me in the story was the gratefulness that Cliff had because of his cancer diagnosis. So because he got a terminal diagnosis, it was then that he started to get prioritized for housing. He started to get access to care in community settings. He got a physician who used a palliative approach, who understood the impacts of the social determinants of health, he was able to call this physician up, get access to legitimate pain medication because he had a legitimate diagnosis. And he described his quality of life as way better than before without his legitimate diagnosis. So because of the lifetime of negative experiences in healthcare, people that I work with assume that they're going to be treated badly, and they don't trust very easily, for good reason. And I always think about Cliff's case and what his care could have looked like and what his life could have looked like if he um, you know, wasn't diagnosed to the point where, he couldn't receive treatment, and thinking about just what it would take to be able to get him access to care earlier in life. Um, and so really those impacts of what people face in the system, really is these harms of late diagnosis, of not getting access to treatment, and dying deaths that could have been prevented, and suffering at end of life due to unmet pain and symptom needs. So that's kind of the bad news and the truth that I think that we need to name before going into some of the solutions, right? And so I would say in terms of the good news, and what I would like to focus the rest of the presentation when I talk about these things on, is just really these approaches that are really prioritized by folks that work in the sectors of homelessness. I'm hearing some of these approaches already from my panelists, just around really centering the human, and working to build trust and relationship as the first and main priority of healthcare, learning about the person, and creating safety. So looking forward to getting into some of those approaches and strategies. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley. Harm is inequitable access to care. Yeah, and I think that will probably dovetail nicely into some of Julie's experiences. Julie, do you want to talk about what you've experienced with respect to what harm looks like, feels like in the community where you work?
Yeah, I love everything that you said, Ashley, and also Tammy, when you were talking about the flexibility. that's what we need. We need to be more flexible. Like the system isn't working. Okay, but I'll get back to, okay, so the harms my clients face is lack of housing. So that brings exposure to the elements, risk of violence, infections, medications being stolen. They have lack of affordable food, so not getting proper nutrition, lack of transportation, lack of communication, so missed appointments, lack of knowledge of healthcare, not understanding the terminology of practitioners, lack of access to hygiene supports, so infection risks, stigma because of the color of their skin or their physical appearances, including dirty hands and clothes. And I was going to take that out, dirty hands and clothes, but I think that's important because I think we all, even myself sometimes, when I see someone's dirty right away, I'm kind of like, oh, they're dirty. But we have to realize that that person doesn't necessarily have access to a bathroom or a shower, substance use, being homeless. But the good thing is that so in my role with the PAC team, I get to provide clients the safety piece is building relationships. Like I think that was Ashley speaking about that, building those relationships. And I build relationships with the healthcare workers too. I do referrals for clothing and food. I advocate for housing. I've gotten quite a few people into temporary housing. I support with transportation. I go with people to their appointments. You know, I sit with them, and these guys are just trying to survive. They're not worried about getting to their appointments. They're not worried that they have cancer. They're not worried that they have COPD. They're just trying to get through the day and maybe get some food and possibly a pair of shoes. You know what I mean? So I build a relationship by helping them with their shoes and getting them some food and getting to know them and getting them to that appointment and say like, hey, just come on, you know what I mean? Let's go for lunch after. We'll go to this appointment. And I really do believe it's the relationship building and we really need to be flexible. I'm really lucky. I work in a community health center. I realize a lot of people don't. So I have access to a work van. I have access to money for food. I have a lot of access to stuff like that. And I did work at a shelter before, and I myself was homeless before. So, and I was really sick. So I understand that the need that we need to have bridges like me, not necessarily me, it can be a social worker, can be whoever, just to get these people some help. They don't have phones, they don't have, okay, I'm droning on again. I told myself you're not going to drone on, follow the script, Julie. Anyway, I'm super grateful to be here.
There is no script, Julie. There is
I
no
know,
script. You
no, but
can.
I like jotted things down and I
I
was like,
know.
okay, you're going to stick to the points, you know what I mean? And then not go on to tangents and stuff like that. Because everybody I think here want like we're all here because we want to help people and we all want everyone to get the best care that they can get at end of life and the best care that they deserve. So I'm, you know, anyway.
It's it's super important. I think what you're raising and what I'm hearing through all four of your sharing is, there's sort of two pieces here to safer care. One is ensuring folks have, access to the right types of care and services that are needed. Um, and then the second piece is how are they being provided? Like, are they offered with respect or are they accompanied by judgment? Right? Are they really in response to what matters to the person, or are they more in response to what matters in the moment to the provider? Right. And so when we're talking about person-centered care or relation-centered care, um, you know, it's all hinging on compassion, right? How do we provide compassionate care? And whether that's, focused on loneliness, whether that's focused on, housing, like compassionate care can look like so many different things. And I'm seeing comments in the chat coming in around trust and that building of trust at the center. So this is what I think is really at the heart, right? This is what we're all talking about in safer care in the community is, trust-based, relational, person-centered care, all hinging on compassion. So maybe that's what each of you could perhaps illuminate more specifically from your contacts is, what does compassionate care look like in your communities? So at Actionmarguerite, when folks are providing or receiving compassionate care, what does that look like and what transforms in your environment? And similarly, in New Brunswick, Tammy, when folks are receiving compassionate care, what what happens, right? What are people experiencing? Um, and same for Julie and Ashley. So maybe we can start with Tammy for this question. Then I'll come back to you, Julie, and then Ashley, and then Micheline.
So for us, compassionate care is really it's tailored to the person, and it's also done without judgment, and it's done from a good place. So compassionate care to us once a month. I think it's the first, we try and aim for the first Friday of the month. We go to the food bank for our clients. We had them signed up for the food bank. And there's still a stigma around, and this stigma exists across generations, but especially for older generations, that, going to the food bank is somehow embarrassing to them. We break that down by we go and do it for them. So they can pick up the phone, call in their order, or we can do it. We go pick it up, we deliver it to them. That's, to me, is compassionate care, because we know there's an embarrassment, there's a stigma around it, and there really shouldn't be, but we know they're not going to change that idea. So instead of them not receiving the service, we'll go do it for you. We don't mind. Lugging those boxes it gives us a little bit of workout with our upper body. But that's the individualized care. Just making sure that that person knows you care, you're willing to help them. Advocacy, I think, is a huge part of compassionate care, especially where we want to, seniors need, there's a program in New Brunswick called the Direct to Tenant Benefit. And so it helps seniors who are paying more than 30% of their income to their housing costs, and to apply for that. And we've applied for many clients at this point, but it's a long, arduous process, because you have to collect your notice of assessment. You need a void check. And there's a whole bunch of things you need. Then you need to photocopy them and send them in. And that can be, a bit daunting for somebody who's maybe in their 80s and not technology inclined, doesn't have a computer, doesn't have a printer. So we take that on for them and advocate for it. So we send it in and we follow up on it. And we make sure, like, we tell them, we're going to follow up on it. We will push it through. Don't worry, we're going to take the hard part off of you. So I think advocacy really, if they know that they have a voice, but then you're also helping to project their voice, I think that really does help with the trust too. So they know that you're on their side. And we really try and make sure our clients know that they matter. We listen to them, and we try and identify, okay, well, I hear you're saying this. Is this a beneficial program to you? Okay, let's get you signed up. No, it's no extra work for you. I'll get you signed up. I'll help you get it. We'll connect you with what you need. And kind of advocate for them along the way. So I'd have to say advocacy is huge, and making sure, again, it's person-centered care, right? I wouldn't advocate for a program that they wouldn't really get much out of it. There'd be no point to doing that. But I'd advocate for a program that I feel that, they would get a lot out of, and it would just improve them overall.
Thanks, Tammy. Sorry to leave you hanging there for a minute. I had a sticky mute button.
I understand that.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. So I love those examples of compassionate care. I will go to the food bank, right? No judgment, no questions asked. Whether it's not right or wrong, whether somebody, feels comfortable or less comfortable, and the stigma that's there, it just is. So how can I meet you where you're at? That's what you need. That's what we'll do. And I think that is living compassion. And that is safer care, because that means that someone will access food and get nutrition. And when people are getting nutrition, they're healthier. And when people are healthier, right, it just goes and goes. And I think a lot of folks are in a position where they have to really figure out the business case for compassionate care, unfortunately. And so, how can we afford to put money into roles like seniors coordinators? And I think this is the beginning, is when we can start to see that, folks are not going into emergency departments, right? They're staying home and they're getting the care at the time and place that they need it, or they're not going into long-term care because they're able to stay home and get the care in the way they need it. And so that, That is the dollars and cents case. But to the people receiving care, that's secondary, right? Feeling like they matter, feeling like they're cared for, and not judged. You know, this is the work that you're doing, which is safer care. That's amazing. Um, okay, I did it again and I lost track. So now I'm looking at my notes here and I said I start with Tammy and then I'm going to Julie. Come on in, Julie.
Safer care, yeah. So compassion in my community looks like patient-directed care, like just like we've been talking about. The client needs to tell me what they want. It's not up to me to decide what you want. Maybe I've had people that are living in a tent. They do not want to go into housing. So I'm going to meet them where they're at, and I'm going to try and get healthcare workers to help them where they're at and try and coordinate that. That it's not like someone said, it's not our life. It's their life, how they want to live, right?
Julie, I wonder if you, as somebody who is sort of the intermediary, somebody
Yes.
who gets the privilege of working with folks, you know, on a day-to-day basis and often gets to observe them experiencing healthcare, sometimes in ways that feel good and sometimes in ways that don't. You know, where do you see is the greatest opportunity for people providing formal health care to provide safer care for your clients?
I think when you first meet them and if it's a healthcare worker, when you first meet them and you greet them and sit with them, and we have three actually palliative docs in the city, and they all sit and talk with the client and what are you doing and what's been going on. Like it's not just about coming in and saying, you know, this is your diagnosis. This is what your scan looks like. This is what we're going to do moving forward. This is your medication. They actually come in and they get to know the patient, and like it's just off the charts. The relationships that have been built between the providers and these guys and the clients I'm working with, the vulnerable house. And so I think that's where the change can happen with providers. Take a little extra time. Take a little extra time and get to know the person. And yes, you have your nurse that does all that stuff, but it's really intimidating for somebody who lives on the street to go into a building that they've been kicked out of multiple times for stealing Babash, which is hand sanitizer, let's say, for example. Or they've been strapped down. I have a few clients that I've been able to not, like they'll get strapped down because of their behavior so they've suffered traumas in residential school, one of my guys, and he doesn't speak very well. English is his second language. So they think it's a behavioral thing. So they're strapping him down to try and contain him to give him health care. But like once you can talk to the nurse and the doctor and explain like these are the things that have happened, and maybe if you want him calm, maybe you want to give him a little bit of calmer medication and maybe get to know him a little bit better. That's I don't know. I think that's the relationships again. It's about relationships. I had my one fella that he's another residential school survivor. He's older, 60, and his treatment plan for his cancer was to start off with the radiation. And he had quite a few radiations. So I brought him to his first radiation, and they have to strap you in for radiation. They have to hold your body still so that they can pinpoint the radiation to where it needs to go. So as I'm bringing him, so he finishes his radiation, I'm bringing him back to the shelter, and he says, "I'm not going back. I'm never going back. Like I'm never going back." So I think in the medical field, that's kind of like non-compliance, doesn't want to comply with care. So we had a really good conversation, and I've known him for years because of my past work at the shelter. So he's known me for years, and he explained to me that the things that happened to him in residential school, they did actually tie him down, and he told me some pretty horrendous stuff. So I talked to a doctor who is a palliative care doc on the PACT team, which we meet bi-weekly. I'll explain that later. And I told him, I said, you know, this fellow's not going to come back because he's being strapped down, and it's just really traumatizing to him. And so that doctor talked to the radiation team and they decided that, so if he came back, they would not strap him down. So I convinced him to go back, even though he was terrified. I said, they're not going to strap you down. So he did it, and he did complete all of his radiation treatments. So he's actually cancer free right now. So that's like a win. And that's relationships and, I don't know, connecting with the doctors. And so that really worked. That's a happy story. Anyway, I don't know what else to tell you.
I don't know if you see what's coming in the chat, but you're getting like wows and, great jobs. And I can't agree with you more. It's spending that time.
And
Nice.
when a patient's non-compliant and they're not making it to their appointments and they're not they don't want to get the treatments or whatever, like we need to step out of the box and say like, okay, why doesn't he or she want to get that treatment done? Like there's always a reason. I mean, this guy had, and he's told me some of the stories that happened to him. They're horrendous. There's stuff that you can't, I I don't even know how he's still standing after these things. You know what I mean? But he was another one of my guys that would go in and he would steal the babash off the wall, which again is garbage in Ojibwe, and he would steal the sanitizer because he's trying to deal with his traumas. So, but anyway, and also he's not at the shelter anymore. That same guy, he's in long-term care now, and he's doing actually pretty good. And he likes to still go. It's a good story. He still likes to go party, and so I work with the director at that long-term care home, and because incidents have to go in, right? Like if they're gone for too long, so she'll call me and she'll say, "Hey, so and so, and I'll go find him." Then I go find him, and I've brought him back, or I'll just call her and say, "Yeah, he's okay. He's just over here." So like a community getting like communication. Yeah, anyway, I'm pretty blessed that I get to do this job. I can't believe I get to do this work. It's blows my mind sometimes. I've been doing just over a year and I'm like, wow, am I actually getting to do this? They're paying me to do this. Like, what is happening? So it's pretty incredible for me.
Well, it's a tribute to who you are, Julie. And I just want to, echo Audrey's comment in the chat. All behavior is communication, right? I
Absolutely.
just want like that is such a beautiful, beautiful soundbite to capture what you were sharing. All behavior is communication. I'm going to switch the order because I was going to go to Ashley, but I could see Micheline. I could see you beaming and agreeing and smiling with Julie's sharing. So just in case you wanted to reflect on any of Julie's comments, I'll bring you in next, and then I'll come to you, Ashley.
You're a remover of obstacles, Julie. We talked about that, and that's a big part too, of compassion being it's a way of being. It's not something we do, it's not something we add, it's like in our way of being. And so I don't know you very well. We met like today and the other day, and yeah, that's what really shines through for me, and that is being a really good example for all of us in whatever role we find ourselves in. Because we talked about, well, you're the CEO, you can just, either you put the obstacles in place or you remove them. So I really appreciate that the courage and that you venture out and you do what you need to do. And I'm sure that people come and, and the other part of compassion is that it renews both the giver and the receiver. So when you're, like I'm sure the people that you support, they receive your compassion, but hey, look at that. It's like coming right back at you to renew you. And I feel that too. When I'm in that kind of harmony with another human being, it's this human endeavor. We're there for one another. And I guess I was kind of nodding and laughing and like I can resonate with someone living in long-term care, and well, okay, so now we're gonna like totally change their lifestyle. Come on, like that doesn't make sense. So, but I learned from the long-term care world to change a bit of the perspective, and we're kind of playing around, guys. I want to throw this out too with the terminology of person-directed living. You tell me how you want to live your life. And, like there's nothing wrong with like I used person-centered care pretty much my whole career. I think we're called right now, I feel like we have a call to evolve in the context in which we work. And maybe person-centered care is something that belongs more like, I don't know, in another setting, but I'm curious about person-directed living. So I'll go off on that tangent for a little bit. The other thing that I wanted to say that was coming to mind when Tammy and Julie were speaking is like the fierceness of compassion. So we're not talking here about being nicey nice. Like it's fierce. And I think sometimes we have to demystify that in the perceptions of what compassion means in people's mind and how they've maybe been trained to do that.
Micheline, can I just jump in and ask you if you have an example of where compassion looks fierce? Or where it felt fierce?
The example of, it's a similar example to Julie, where someone who has had a lifestyle of living on the streets and now is going to move into long-term care. And we've done such a good job at rehabilitating the person that they don't like living in long-term care. It's not appropriate for that person, and it's not appropriate for everybody else in the environment. The staff aren't safe, that person's not safe, and the other residents aren't safe. So the fierceness came when we had to say, well, he doesn't want to live here. So now what? Do you know how hard it is to discharge someone from, listen to the word, discharge, that's the word we use, someone from long-term care to go back to where exactly? Community. It took us a year, you guys. It's a little sad. And we kept going, and that was fierce because I could have said as the leader, well then, that's it. He's just going to stay here and everybody, let's deal with it. And we didn't. We went out and we connected with people like, Julie in our community in Winnipeg, and we sorted things out, and we did like totally go outside of the box because like I had, some of our staff say, don't worry about it, Micheline, got you covered. We'll go out, we'll get the furniture. So Tammy, same thing, well, we'll do it. We'll do what we need to do to surround this person with what they are directing us to do as human beings, to make sure that they're in the best, that they're living the life that they want to live, however that is. So that's an example for me anyways of like really being fierce, and there were lots of moments of tensions in that adventure.
I love that example of what compassion looks like, right? Compassion is helping people move on, move to where they want to be, even if that means jumping through a year's worth of hoops, to help somebody move back into the community.
And the judgment also can come the other way. Like, so people were judging us for wanting this person to support this person to move out, because they were like, well, you guys are trying to just get get rid of this person. Like you're just wanting to wash your hands and not have this person live in this environment anymore. And I fought that. Like I really busted that myth too. And that was really not respecting the person at the heart of all of this. So it wasn't about anybody else but the person.
No. What I really admire is, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to hear the conversations, right? These are safety conversations. These are brave conversations, right? To hold that tension when you're being accused of just trying to get rid of someone so that they don't become your problem anymore, when what you're really saying is, no, this is for them. This is what they want. This is what they need. And I can imagine they can be really uncomfortable conversations, as a lot of, person-centered
Uncomfortable, and like the responsibility is heavy. The responsibility of sorting it out, like gotta really trust that. And can ask my team, they're always like, you always say this, Micheline, things unfold as they should. It took a year. Okay. They think it unfolded as it should, and trust and be ready to live with a lot of uncertainty. And we can hold that, because guess what? Our world is really uncertain. I don't know when it was certain, but I don't think it ever was. But can we at this point in the evolution of human beings, be okay with uncertainty?
Mm-hmm. Great reflection. Really great. Ashley, would you like to come on in?
Yeah, there's been so many things I could comment on, but I think that what I wanted to kind of reinforce what I heard from Julie was that I think, and what I'm hearing, the theme I'm hearing across, the panelists is really just around how trust is built through actions. And I think we focus so much about around language you use, using the right terms, what service providers can do at that individual level in health and social settings. But I think what's really important to recognize is that there are always ways that frontline providers can be creating safety depending on, body language and, prioritizing the needs of the person, even understanding what those needs are and how they define care and safety, what their life has been, all that sort of stuff. But one thing that really struck me hearing from Julie was just around the knowledge that the workers have that have been really like closely supporting people in community, and how sometimes these barriers come up. Healthcare workers, because of inflexibility or because of their role and their scope, can't do the most important thing for that person. The most important thing might be getting ID, might be getting storage for belongings, might be getting housing, might all this. But there are people that can do that in the community. And I feel like when we come up against a barrier, shouldn't be the impact of that or the outcome of that shouldn't be, no, we can't offer those services. Your home is so risky. You're non-compliant or whatever. You're not a fit for this service. It's really around how do we get the care that the person needs as defined by that person. So that's kind of what I'm hearing in the conversation, which I'm really excited about. And I think the other like big factor is that when we talk and we give these examples of homelessness and poverty and substance use and stuff, I think like more and more people are living away from their families. More people are becoming homeless every day. Seniors on fixed pensions who can't afford their mortgage, who can't afford their taxes. More and more we are going to need to attend to these social determinants of health in order to create the conditions for good care. And I love Tammy's example of shoveling snow to get access to care, like very practical needs that need to be met. And if that can't be done in health services, there is somebody that can do that in community. And so to me, it is the fostering of those partnerships between health services community agencies, social services, the person's own network of support, and how do we foster that kind of and build capacity for communities to be involved in provision of care. And so, yeah, and then the other thing I think about is just how people define safety and how people in the community define safety and how that comes up against organizational definitions. Like, for example, coming from WorkSafe, like Tammy had brought up, oh, okay, well, we have ice on, the walkway, things like that. And so it's like sometimes those things can stand as barriers. And the example that I always think about is, people that, might have homes that are deemed risky and not be able to get, home support or things like that because they are substance users or they might have cluttered homes or things like that. And how, even our attempts at trying to mitigate that risk, like calling and being like, do you have all these things, with a person that has that history of being judged and not heard or believed, and not being treated well, then here's on the phone, like that's the first thing that's being attended to, like that barrier, like, oh, you use drugs, oh, you have behavior issues, oh, you've got a mark on your record that says that you're violent, oh, you live in this building that seem risky. So that's kind of the first point of contact a lot of times that people have from mainstream systems. Whereas if you talk to the frontline nurses, they would probably have lots of other ideas of how they mitigate their own risk. And their approaches. If you talk to workers that work in the buildings where people are living, they also have other strategies to approach people in good ways, to mitigate any sort of conflict or to prevent any sort of conflict from happening. So, so I just think about how sometimes, just the way that organizational kind of safety is defined, and then how that is enacted in community and the people and how that works on the front line. Like there needs to be more conversation there to kind of really say like, how do you define it? How do you mitigate it? All that from people's lived experience and also their own intuition around like safety, right? So that's all I'll say for now. But I think there's lots of things to pick up on with what's said, and I agree with the panelists so far. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley. And you sort of naturally transitioned into, I think another place the conversation is funneling around, how do we create the conditions that allow for compassionate care? And I've also been picking up on this tension between, the safety of the provider versus the safety of the person receiving care. And when it seems like, those conditions are at odds, it's in either or, I can't go in and provide care because it's not safe for the provider. But then it's not safe for that person not to be getting that care. How do we reframe that? How do we create those and situations? And you're sort of citing that it's a lot of times those solutions are there. Like it's in the creativity and it's in the experience and it's in the wheelhouse of a lot of frontline care providers that they figured out those solutions. But within healthcare organizations, they might not have that front of mind, and they may not know that those solutions exist. Again, and I know, Tammy, you've had some experiences with that as well in terms of the tension between, meeting safe care and the needs of clients and doing that in a way that provides safe conditions for those providing care. Did you have anything you wanted to feather in or reflect on with Ashley's sharing?
Yeah, so we found, the Miramichi community, for anybody who's familiar with it, it's a good group of people. Like we're a town of about, I think, including outlying areas, around 20 to 25,000. So we're not big. We're a small town in a small province, but there is so many helpers out there. So if there is a safety risk, we usually have people we can kind of call on with permission of the client to share information. Like that carpenter that was able to go down into a flooded basement and submerge a sump pump because he had to wear rubber boots. We weren't sure if the water had hit an electrical source. So that was the big kind of risk around that, about getting that basement pumped out, was we couldn't go in there without having some kind of protection on your feet. There's a chance that the water could have been electrified, but he said, no, this is what I do every day, no problem. And he was able to go down and do that. We've also had we had to clear out a senior who was living in severe hoarding. And we work very closely with our MLA. For those who are in Ontario, other places, that would be similar to your MPP. It's your member of Legislative Assembly. It's your provincially elected official. And she is phenomenal. And she was able to get money to rent a dumpster so we could throw out all the garbage that was in this woman's place and clear it out, because she couldn't get home care help without having it cleared out first. The home care agency wouldn't go in. And there was an extreme smell in the house, so I understand it. We ourselves took Vicks and put vanilla extract in it and put it on our nose and wore masks when we were in the home, because the smell was very extremely overpowering. But we found a solution. Let's go talk to our MLA, see if we can get some money, or the churches are always willing to help. There's community people. It's very easy to find helpers out there if you go and look. And they might be Salvation Army, they might be a group of church ladies that just are more than happy to help. They might be, you just never know where you're going to find them. College students, university students, they're always looking to help, especially those who are in social work or some kind of helping degree. You'd be surprised where you find your helpers. And again, like I got a call one day from that man who's a carpenter, and he said, this, I've been told to call you, how to fix this. And I was like, okay, let's, keep an open mind. You don't know what the situation is. So every time we get a call, we're like, we'll go talk to them, see what we can do. It's always let's go see if we can do something. If we can't, I can guarantee we have someone who can help. So find your helpers. That can kind of get around some of the hazards, because it's a hazard to us, but there is somebody out there who's specially trained to know how to do that. So see if you can rely on your community members. The majority of people out there are willing to help vulnerable people, and especially with seniors, the majority of people, they all have grandparents, they all have aging parents. They're more than willing to help.
You're really articulating well, Tammy, the importance of the role of community in community health. It's not just health providers, it's community members, it's your neighbors, right? It's your local organizations and associations, it's your churches, it's your community groups, and the role, that we as community members all have to lift each other up and provide safer care. And there was a question early on when Micheline was sharing about, the integration of volunteers in the organization around, how do you then integrate those roles, back into, the knowledge of healthcare workers that are providing care. So Micheline, if you've got volunteers that really get to know people, right? They know their preferences, they know their histories, they know what lights them up, they know, what gets in their way. How do we integrate that knowledge of the community members that are providing care with those providing paid formal care, so that can come to bear on the way they receive the formal side of services? And I think it's the same in all your environments, that you all rely on informal and interact with, community care providers. And so how do we then interface that with the formal healthcare system, so that the healthcare workers can provide more, relational, person-centered human care?
So we know, Andrea, we needed to provide like orientation to the teams, to the care teams, about how you get along with volunteers, right? So it's not just like, well, it'll happen magically. It's like, pay attention, to the concerns that the care team has about having someone being close to, for us, they're really long time residents, like people. So for some people, they live a long time at Actionmarguerite, and the staff have become really attached, and that's good. And if the person wants to build meaningful relationships outside of a paid relationship, that should be fostered. But we did feel the need to offer those types of, you know, orientations and how are we going to work together. So yeah, it's doable.
It's doable for sure. I'm just looking at the time. I can't believe how fast the session has gone. And so I think, you know, in wrapping up this portion, I'd like to invite each of you to share a reflection, something that you would love the audience um, to take with them as they go. So, what is it that you want people to consider or to do differently today based on this conversation around providing safer, compassionate care in the community? What would be your one ask? And maybe I'm just going to go in order of my screen and I'm going to ask you first, Ashley. What do you want people to do differently?
So what do I want people to do differently? I think that, I mean, obviously there's lots of approaches I think that have come out today just around strategies for like focusing on relationship, focusing on building trust, centering the person and what their needs are as opposed to the system's needs. As much as we can incorporate these kinds of changes in health systems, I think we also just need to recognize that people are going to access care outside of health systems and in community organizations, community settings where they have felt safe to access care. And these kinds of community associations, organizations, community groups are often under threat. And yesterday I went to a rally for the closure of the threatened closure of the supervised consumption site in Calgary. And at that rally, you know, I heard about how these sites are so much more than drug use. They're really about that, creating that community connection, a safe place for people to get reprieve from the harms of homelessness, from the stigma, from the discrimination. And they're a place for people to support one another in their struggles, in their grief. And then we look at this kind of a place that offers this kind of safe model of care for people that have been harmed in systems. And the threats are to cut the funding, the threats are to close it down. So I think in addition to making changes in the way in mainstream systems, we need to protect the kinds of services and organizations and community groups that are out there existing and doing the work, hold them up, say thank you, show up when their funding is threatened to be cut, and really throw our support behind those kinds of initiatives. Thanks.
Well said. Thank you, Ashley. Julie, what's something
Hi.
that you want folks to take away from this session? What really matters to you that you hope people really heard?
So I just wanted to comment on what you were saying about the safe injection sites, because this position I'm doing right now, sorry, this is off topic, but I've been in this position as a contract. My actual full-time position is in our safe injection site that's in this community health center. So I was in there full-time for about 3.5 years until I came to this position. And exactly what you said is so accurate. When you were saying that, I was like, oh my God, this girl has my heart. So I just wanted to say thank you for even mentioning that, because it has made a difference. It is a small portion of IV drug users that use it here, but the people that use it are very vulnerable females that are homeless, and we do make a difference. We do make a difference in their lives. It's not just about injecting drugs, like you said. Anyway, okay. Sorry, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about palliative care. So refocus. Sorry, what do I want people to leave with today following today's conversation? I think it's I think being flexible. We've all kind of said that, being really flexible about what we're willing to do to help people, and trusting people like me with lived experience. Like, I'm not a social worker. I actually worked for the government before, you'd believe it or not, but trust people, trust your community partners, trust in the specifically for the homeless population, the frontline workers that are they want to help. If you're a nurse and you reached out to a community place and you know, those workers are going to help you. They're gonna help. So be flexible, do something different. Leverage your compassionate providers like I do. Um, and also don't discount the anxiety of the the healthcare providers. That's another thing. So one of the things that I try and do is really pay attention to what the healthcare provider is going through, like being empathetic to my clients, yes, but being empathetic also to the healthcare provider, because then you understand, like it's kind of good to understand both, you know, because we're all just people, we're all just trying to get by, we all just trying to live. Just take the time to get to know your patients and your clients better.
Thank you,
That's it.
Julie. That's a beautiful note to leave on. Tammy, last reflections, something you want people to take away from today's conversation.
Yeah, so similar to what Ashley and Julie said, be flexible. You know, be open to new ideas, be open to doing things different ways, maybe, you know, and having those community connections and conversations with other service providers. You're going to learn a lot from them. What I do is maybe not necessarily the best way to do something, but if someone, you know, says, "Hey, have you tried this?" You know, trying that new idea, it could bring into something, you know, more valuable. Be kind, be compassionate, you know, really get to know the person and love them with your whole heart. You know, put your heart and soul into what you do. I think you get a lot more out of being in a helping profession, and we're all in a helping profession. If we, you know, help with our whole heart and go into it with the best of intentions, and where you can, have fun. When we did that cleanup on that hoarder house, we had music playing. We all pitched in and ordered pizza, and we all hung out, and you know, we made it a really fun afternoon with just all of us in the most positive, happy way. And so, you know, the 4 hours that we were there, 5 hours, it didn't drag on. It was enjoyable. It was fun. And we gave the lady who we were cleaning out, she said she had the best afternoon ever. Because she said it was just like hanging out with her girlfriend, she said. So, you know, having that approach of just taking it from a positive perspective, I find that really helpful as well.
Well, I can't thank you enough for adding that into this conversation. I think we get very focused on the work of this and the difficulties of doing some of this, and we forget that, you know what, this is also fun. This is a beautiful, amazing experience. So love that. Micheline, last one over to you before we close out.
Just what's coming up for me right now is like a felt sense just of the exchange here with the panelists, with you, Andrea, the now 342 people that are still hanging out, and also HEC, like Healthcare Excellence Canada. So the felt sense that I have is really, it's about love. So, and Tammy, Julie, I think we all said the word love somewhere in here. And if we can just, you know, be allowed to you know, what all of a sudden we need to be allowed, like maybe we don't need to be allowed. Maybe we reconnect with that true, you know, sense of this love and this very human work. And it's like, I want to just say continue. And you have everything in you to be with the joys and the struggles of what it means to be human. So that's that. Thanks.
Thank you. Beautiful sentiment. I feel like we needed a song to go out on with that, Micheline. I'm going to ask you to call up the slides now for our producers. And I want to take this time to formally thank you, Micheline, Tammy, Julie, Ashley. This was a brave conversation. And it was really a brave conversation about having brave conversations in your communities so that we can continue to evolve our ability to provide safer care, which looks and it feels like compassionate care in the community. And I just want to acknowledge that, like, we're not born knowing how to have these kinds of conversations, and exploring what safety means to the people we're providing care with and for. And so, you know, really, I encourage you to learn, to practice, make mistakes, have self-compassion, keep practicing, keep learning what matters to the people in your community. And we're here at HEC to support your journey. We have lots of resources. Here's a couple just to show you. We have safety conversation tools that help to provide guidance on how to structure conversations. We have a Rethinking Patient Safety Guide if you have folks around you that you just want to help them kind of stretch a little bit in terms of thinking more broadly about harm and some of the concepts that we talked about today. If you haven't already, please register for our mailing list. This will give you access to these types of tools and invitations for future programs and events. You can still sign up for Patient Safety Week. We have one more webinar coming up later in November. And finally, we're just grateful you chose to spend this time with us. And if you could spend 30 seconds more just to complete the on-screen poll, this will help us plan for future events. So thank you once again, Micheline, Tammy, Julie, Ashley, and thank you, audience, for everything you do every day to ensure that our communities have access to safer and higher quality care. This concludes our webinar. I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you.